Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Mark J. Silverman. Welcome to a new chapter in the Rising Leader Podcast. Not quite sure what I'm doing. Haven't even recorded the introduction to what we're going to be talking about, although you probably heard it because I'll record it after this. But I decided that I wanted to take a little bit more of myself and my journey and my way of being in the world and infuse it into this podcast. It's what I do in my private practice. It's the conversations that I have. It's the people that I admire and follow and learn from that make me effective as a coach, but not in the traditional way. So when I was sitting on my meditation cushion and deciding how do I want to take 2025 for the Rising Leader Podcast and who did I want to talk to, a few people came to mind. The first one came to mind is our next guest. Sam Morris is someone I followed for years now. We've never actually met in person, but I have learned from him just more by how he models himself in the world, more about how his being shows up in my world just through a computer screen. We have had a conversation on the Mastering Midlife podcast years ago, so that was a highlight for me. But when I was thinking about, talking to you guys about the stresses of your life, the stresses of having these high demand, greedy jobs that ask a lot of you. They pay a lot, but they ask a lot of you, of trying to figure out how to be in relationship with yourself. Sam was the first person I wanted to be on the podcast. So officially, Sam Morris is a visionary leader, entrepreneur, blending resilience and innovation to empower individuals and organizations. He's the founder of Zen Warrior Training, a transformative leadership development program, and the co-founder and CEO of USA Protective Care, a pioneering brand protection and data intelligence company. And this is why Sam's here. Sam's leadership philosophy is deeply informed by his personal journey. After surviving a life-altering car accident in 1999 that left him paralyzed from the waist down, he transformed adversity into a profound source of strength and insight. The experience shaped his ability to inspire others, embody the essence of the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Today's Sam leverages his unique perspective to guide leaders in cultivating resilience, clarity, and purpose in the face of challenges and in his own company now as CEO. Sam, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I so appreciate you having me on as your debut guest of the new evolution of your podcast.
Right, we're gonna take everybody on a wild ride that we don't even know where it's gonna go.
We have no idea, which is what's so much fun about it.
In your like when I'm invited on stage or on podcasts, it's usually because I was homeless and then I was, and a few years later I was a millionaire. So like I get to be a short Jewish Tony Robbins. Like that's why people invite me on, not because of my expertise, not because of my intelligence. My story is really kind of flashy. Yours is tragic when it's first heard, but it's it's also like this is kind of your pass to why the resonance of what your wisdom brings. Like, look, I've dealt with this, so I have something to say.
Sure.
But my guess is that what doesn't kill you make you stronger. It's not the thing that happened that made you stronger. It's the healing process that made you stronger.
Sure.
Would you say that is how you built Sam Morris today?
Yeah. I would say that strength in my definition of the term has to do with sort of an anti-fragility, which is the ability to go through challenging circumstances, learn what there is to learn, grow with what there is to grow from, and come out the other side a more complete version of oneself, I suppose. And a lot of that is just breaking down the assumption of who we think that we are in order to tap into something greater. And this, no matter who you are, this is one of the most universal human experiences ever, is that we identify through certain roles and certain identification patterns, mental structures, essentially, that give us our frame of reference for how we interpret ourselves in the world. And that frame of reference is largely illusory. and it's meant to be broken up. And the more it gets broken up, we can either go completely crazy and schizophrenic, or we can use the wisdom from those experiences to become a more integrated version of ourselves. And so that's really been a big part of my path, and part of how I've mentored others who are going through their own obstacles of identity and the stresses of certain roles that they've played in their lives.
Nice, thank you. Well, we're gonna put in the show notes a link to my conversation with Sam that goes deeper into that story and his healing in that journey. For today, I'm more interested in CEO Sam and how you walk through the world. A client of mine, really tall, really good looking, really successful, said to me, "You know, Mark, I'm really jealous of your story." He said, "I really never had anything happen to me." Like nothing bad has happened to me. So as a result, my life's kind of flat. It's good, it's wonderful, but it's kind of flat. I don't have the passion and the peaks and valleys that you have. And I said, be careful what you wish for, because like that journey that you just shared uh, isn't as neat and tidy as it sounded.
No, no, that's
Um,
for sure.
so the question is, where do we start to look at our lives, our careers? Like, let's say things are fine, and things are fine, and there wasn't a catalyst, a divorce or a sickness or something like that to make us have to look. Where do we start to look to improve what's already okay?
Well, I would say where we start is looking at what roles have we adopted in our lives that have created that sort of sense of plainness, that because you're right, there is a sort of an elusive type of experience that, you like you said, it's not necessarily based on some type of traumatic experience, or it's not necessarily created by some type of life altering experience like a divorce or whatever, but it's more just a sort of a plainness, a similarity from day to day to day to day to day that gets really old, and where additional responsibilities are added onto your already full plate, and there's just sort of an underlying sense of stress that is informing one's life. And I think that happens to pretty much everyone, especially folks in the high achieving, high performance space, because look, we are those who are willingly attracting those circumstances into our lives. And a lot of it, like I think, like you're pointing out, when it's more elusive, it can be hard to identify the roles that we've taken on. And I think part of coming out of that is working on recognizing our true nature as distinct from the roles that we're playing. And when I say true nature as distinct from the roles that we're playing, recognizing ourselves as nature itself. And that, even that comment might seem a little bit trite or cliche or something like that. But really, that's been a big part of how I've learned to reconnect, is through actually having a relationship with nature itself, and not always being in the role of CEO, not always being in the role of partner, not always being in the sort of the static identity that we take on. And so breaking that up a little bit by recognizing that we are nature itself, and ultimately this is a game, and this is an adventure. And the more we take things super seriously, the more we're just causing ourselves to experience sort of chronic inflammation and stress, and that sense that we're kind of on that Groundhog Day cycle.
That's the piece that is elusive to a lot of the people that I talk to. When you say have a relationship with nature, they're like, I go hiking. They don't. I'm not sure that they understand what that means, and figuring and kind of even separating themselves from their job, their And I don't even think it's the job. Because I remember I used to say that I'm not going to die young because God wants me to work really fucking hard until the day that I die, right? To take care of everybody. Because I had that belief that I was only what I contributed to everybody around me. Uh, how do you start to question those things in your life, like your job, your identity, your drives?
Yeah, well, it's a question of the vantage point, I suppose, right? I'm thinking about your example of the person who is probably many listening to this podcast right now, who, like you said, I go for hikes. I experience nature. Well, there's as we all know, there's degrees to which we can experience nature. There's being in nature and having the regular thoughts that we're used to thinking, sort of being just running our mind in the default mode network of the brain, just mental chatter as we are in nature. Or there is actually a different, more sublime experience that people tend to pop in and out of from time to time, which is the feeling of actually being part of nature. And those are very different experiences. When you're hiking as an activity to do to sort of get some stress off, or because it's this thing that you do on the weekend or whatever, but you're kind of still in the same basic mind pattern that you might be while you're driving your car or while you're doing things at work, and there's still the
Or while you're
mental
driving for success. We got to the top of that hill. We
yeah,
did 6 miles.
exactly. It's another goal. It's another goal, exactly. Or you're listening to a podcast that's distracting you, because listening to not to say that we don't want to listen to podcasts, because everyone wants to listen to this podcast, of course, but hearing things in our mind, going over things, trying to problem solve. There's a place for that. That's certainly there's an important place for that in our lives. But then there's an even deeper place, and this is a place that is really the byproduct of meditation practices and really letting go of all of the stimulus so that we can re-experience our original nature versus being in nature, versus having nature be like a place that we go to recreate. That's one thing, but there's a deeper level of appreciation where one is under stimulate. What's the word that I'm looking for? There's less stimulus coming in, less mental chatter, and one can actually have an experience, an authentic experience
You
of
mean present? Being
embodying
present.
the very same presence that nature has, which is a fundamentally different experience, and is a profound shift in consciousness. Only profound because we're so accustomed to living in a world of mental chatter. Really, it's really not that profound. It's ordinary, but the fact of the matter is we have so disconnected from what's ordinary that we think ordinary is just simply listening to the thoughts in our heads, and all the stress and all the inflammation and all that stuff.
So I'm one of your CEO clients, and I'm going to go for a short hike with my kids this weekend. What would you suggest that I do differently than I normally do?
I would say turn everything off that is any kind of distraction, and really practice being with every footstep. And when I say that, I'm really talking about redirecting one's attention and recognizing that we're frequently associating attention with thoughts. What am I thinking about? But thoughts are secondary to attention. If I say tip of your nose right now, your attention went to the tip of your nose. You're not thinking about the tip of your nose, you're sensing the tip of your nose. If I say soles of your feet, your attention naturally goes to the soles of your feet. It's not a thought, it's simply, or the thought may have followed your attention going to the soles of your feet. You might now be thinking, now I'm thinking about the soles of my feet. But fundamentally, the first thing that happens is your attention goes to the soles of your feet. So attention is really everything. And every one of us knows that If we are going to perform well, it's a matter of where am I placing my attention at any given time. But fact is, a lot of the time we're placing our attention on things that don't really matter that much, that are taking us away from the present moment, where we are regurgitating past experiences, what happened over the course of last week, and we're thinking about hypothetical conversations or meetings or whatever that we have coming up over the next day or the next week. In the meantime, we're totally missing the experience
My
of
attention is on the fact that for some reason there's people doing gardening work and has gas powered blowers in their house, and they'd already done that. So I don't know why they're back. So I'll bring my attention back here. So
the
why,
ubiquitous sound.
why is this like, I don't want to lose my edge. I don't like what drove me, got me here. You know,
Mm,
the all of this stress is why I'm successful.
mm.
Uh, if I slow down, if I smell the roses, is that going to take my edge off?
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting argument to be made for the notion that the stress may not be exactly what got you here. I think that's something to examine at some point. I think that there's a frequently that seems to be the culturally endorsed mechanism for success is stress. And
Celebrate.
it's so normalized that we take pride in the amount of stress that we put into our lives. Now, as CEO of USA Protective Care, I'm constantly reinforcing being in flow state versus being in stress, because stress will make one come to decisions that frequently don't serve the team, don't serve the self, and don't serve the team, and behaviors that are not consistent with the incremental progress that really helps a team to build responsibly and coherently. Stress can easily take us out of that coherent state. So I think we need to question whether stress is actually such an important part of our lives and the thing that has actually motivated us. I have not been motivated by stress much in my own life personally. I don't like stress. I don't like to be in a state of, chronic inflammation. Certainly, it's not healthy. I like to operate from a place of vitality. So if
Mm.
I'm feeling that I have resistance or there's some obstacle that I'm procrastinating around, my what I do for myself is I bring more vitality into my body.
How do you
I
do that?
I bring through breath, through movement, through going, okay, I'm just operating at a level of vitality that is where the problem that is presenting itself appears to be greater than my ability to conquer it. And so that's a byproduct of feeling of not having enough vitality in my body, not having enough breath, not having enough movement. Maybe I'm not sleeping well enough. So what do I need to do? What behavior change that do I need to make? It's not going to be agitate myself more or beat myself up more. It's going to be self-care related. What do I need to do in terms of self-care right now that is going to give me the vitality and energy to be able to handle the obstacle that's presenting itself and to bring greater focus into what needs to be handled?
I just had a conversation of that exact thing with a client who has hugely stressful job, big rewards, big demands, and just he and his wife just had their second baby. Talked them into getting a nanny because they both work greedy jobs. So they have the nanny, and he was complaining about a bunch of things that were going on at work, and that he was not getting any sleep. He's exhausted. And I said, okay, so when are you going to have a conversation with your wife about how to use the nanny so you both can get rest? And he started arguing about dynamics between him and his wife and how that's, it's preferable to be exhausted than to poke the bear of a woman who just had a baby, that kind of thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we talked some more about the job, and we talked some more about the people and the challenges he was facing. and he asked me at the end, I don't remember how it was, said something about, well, is there anything else, Mark, that you see here? I said, yeah, what I see here is everything we talked about is superfluous to you getting a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you actually have that difficult conversation with your wife about how to use the nanny more, so that you both can get some rest, a lot of those problems will go away.
Yeah.
That's when he
Yeah.
finally took the note. He goes, all right, we'll have the conversation tonight. But I was listening
Yeah.
to all that other stuff going, if he's exhausted, he's not going to be able to deal with these difficult people that he's complaining about. He's not at his
Yeah.
best. So it's very rubber meets the road practical.
Well, it's yes, absolutely. And as you were sharing that, it's reminding me too of the fact that human beings tend to have these very elusive addictions to how they identify in the world. So, for example, if as CEO, I identify with someone who takes on stress and who has this sort of resilient attitude towards stress, and I take it on, um, and I wake up every morning feeling stress about what lies ahead, but I'm going to conquer that stress, and I go to bed every night feeling stress about the next day or whatever, then I'm reinforcing that as an identity pattern based on a role that I think that I'm playing.
Mm,
And I'm going to look unconsciously for opportunities to reinforce stress. I'm going to look for opportunities to feel cortisol in my body because I'm going to be addicted to the feeling that that brings me, because it's going to lead me to reinforcing my sense of self-importance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is really the wounded child who will never be able to feel like it has significance and validation independent of reinforcing the wound of separation. And I've got to take it on myself, I got to take this burden on myself, and blah 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 blah. There's a lot of people who are operating like that. Even though they think they want to experience less stress in their lives, they're actually addicted to the feeling of there being a burden in their lives that they have to take on. Like, get over it. Get over the notion that there is a burden that you need to take on. That's a childlike mentality that is, sorry to say, but it's not leading to a particularly relaxing life. And you can be more productive and more happy, and I think that we're all seeking more productivity and more happiness. It seems to be the universal thing. But if you're addicted to feeling like you're taking on burdens all the time in order to reinforce an egoic role in your business or in your life, well, that addiction is going to run the show, and you're going to find every way possible to reinforce that identity pattern.
I think it's important to point out though that that egoic role that we're talking about isn't a bad thing. It isn't a selfish thing. It's basically that little child
Yeah,
trying to be okay, to get love. We
sure.
overwork to so that we can compensate for not feeling okay. We make all this
Right.
money, like a lot of this is just so we can feel even in the world. I remember I worked 3 times as hard as everybody else because I just didn't feel on an even par with everybody else. And that's what was driving it. It wasn't a nefarious thing. It was a wound. It was a self-worth thing. And that,
Yeah,
putting the work there helped tame some of those behaviors.
absolutely. Absolutely. And what this brings to mind is the difference between control and agency. And control being when we think that we need to be in control of every circumstance in our lives, which ultimately, any wise person knows that we are not in control of everything, that we can't be in control of everything, that it is completely impossible to be in control of everything, versus agency, which is the ability to move and adapt to circumstances as they present
Mm,
themselves, which is very different from control. It's agency is we all want to have more agency, but a lot of people are seeking agency through control versus recognizing that agency comes from letting go of control.
mm, nice. So let's say you get a new client, never cracked open a spiritual book in their life, just knows achievement, knows succeeding. knows playing the game really hard. And it's your first session, and you're sending them off to start on this journey with you. What's the homework? Where do people start to loosen that grip on what they knew to start to actually take a look at what you're sharing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a little bit different with each one of them.
Of
But
course.
I'll use a analogy that actually Michael Singer, who's the author, as you know, the author of The Untethered Soul, uses, because I think this is a very useful analogy to separate one's sense of self from one's circumstances. So he uses the analogy, and this is rather graphic, but imagining that you're lying on a bed and you have a curtain between your head and the rest of your body. And you're having a conversation with someone, and you have no idea that on the other side of that curtain, someone is slowly anesthetizing parts of your body and cutting off your limbs. They cut off your foot, they cut off your leg, and you're just, you have no idea because you're anesthetized and you're talking with the person on the other side of the curtain. And they could remove a lot of your body with your body actually still surviving. Your organs could still be intact, but they remove all of your limbs. And it's only when they remove the curtain and you see what has happened that you go into absolute shock. Up until then, everything was just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I find this to be a very useful analogy because we can all imagine that, as graphic as it is, we can all imagine that happening and having no idea that our body was slowly being taken away from us and thinking that we're just fine. And that is a great example or a great analogy to elucidate what we really mean by mindful awareness versus being caught in the circumstances of one's life, where the stressor is a byproduct of the relationship between what we think should be and what is.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as there is that a rift between what we think should be and what is, and it is causing an emotional reaction, then we are stuck in a state of mental paralysis around what is presenting itself in our lives.
Beautiful. For
But
my
if we can recognize and practice being with what is without being in that emotional trigger response to what is occurring in the world that we're living in, then we are naturally starting to build a state of equanimity. And in a certain way, I, in my conversations with clients, I almost try to avoid the terms like spiritual, even though I have it's sort of a loose abstraction, and it's pointing in a direction. But I prefer to get it into the most functional, nitty-gritty thing that we can all recognize that is independent of any belief in God or anything like that. To recognize that there are some fundamentals to the way that the human mind and consciousness work that don't require any belief in anything, including even the notion of a soul, spirit, etc. We can, using that analogy, we can recognize that we are either being with our circumstances, being with what is, or we are being in some type of antagonistic relationship with what is that is causing an emotional trigger response.
As Byron Katie says, when you argue with reality, you only lose 100% of the time.
Yeah, so you lose 100% of the time.
She can bottom line it for us. Yeah, people who listen to this podcast know I tell them to turn off my podcast and go listen to Michael Singer's. He's got 3 seasons of transformational podcasts that are
It's fantastic.
jaw dropping. It's really good. So again, I'm curious. Since we're on the morbid of part of taking apart bodies, let's say you were going to die tomorrow. I told you I was going to ask this question. I think I'm going to ask this question of every guest. You're going to die tomorrow. what do you need the world to know? What are we missing that you know that we should know?
Well, this may sound trite, but I think recognizing that this has all been meant to be a game to be played versus something to take extremely seriously, that this human experience is not something that we need to frown and wrinkle our forehead about and get all stressed out about. None of this is going to matter. None of this matters. Is it the real practice, as I see it, is recognizing how insignificant the whole thing is, and everything has been along this journey. Um, the the tendency to try to apply excessive importance to one's life and life experience, I think, creates that attachment to legacy and that attachment to the roles that we play and so forth. But all of that is just, being caught up in the matrix versus having a 30,000-foot perspective on it. And I would just encourage everyone to keep practicing having that 30,000-foot perspective on life itself, so that no matter what happens, no matter whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win, or this happens or that happens, it's all just continuous cycles of life that have nothing to do with us personally. We've had the opportunity to play the game for a little while, but the outcome can't be is the outcome is never going to conform to our personal preferences. So let's just let go of outcome altogether and be with what is, and recognize that that is the best that we can possibly do.
Hmm.
That's
I didn't learn that perspective until well into my 50s. I didn't quite get it. And the penny hadn't dropped that this is absolutely true until my 60s. Now I know what you're saying is true. How do you know that this is, how do you know it's not so also important?
well, that has to come through embodied experience. That's not something that someone can conceptually. I mean, even now, as I'm conceptually speaking to that, it's an elusive philosophical concept from that perspective. But this is something that, due to my own life circumstances, I started to know as an embodied truth very early on in my life. It's not something that someone could have taught me. It's not a concept that I could, write down or learn from a book and say, well, that sounds good, and I'm going to adopt that mindset. It's not really a mindset. It's an inner knowing. And it's an inner knowing that I think we either are tapping into or we're not tapping into. But we can practice it through that experience of practicing being present,
Mhm.
practicing one foot after another, literally bringing the attention as fully as possible into the unfolding moment.
Mhm. It makes me want to cry that you shared that. I kind of set you up there because I asked you, what do you want the world to know that we need to know if you were going to die? And that's your truth. And I resonate with that because if I were to die, I want people to know the same thing because I now know this to be true. But no, like that's the challenge with trying to do the podcast the way I'm trying to do it right now, and conveying things that you and I and some people have experienced and cultivated and worked towards, and whatever it is we've done to arrive at this. Um, like in AA, when people aren't ready to quit drinking, they say they haven't hit a bottom, and we used to say it's our job to raise the floor so that their bottom is higher. I'm trying to
Mm,
raise the floor here.
mm,
I want people to hear because I believe 2025, 2026 is going to be a little more stressful than we're used to.
mm, mm,
And I want to give people tools and perspectives to ride these waves and make 2025, 2026 the best years of their lives, no matter what the circumstances of the world are.
Yeah.
So this was my messy way of doing it, and you were my guinea pig in figuring this out.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's such an exciting time to be alive because it really is requiring more of us. And to me, what requires more of us is what's exciting. And more of us requires, regularly looking at that stained glass window that we've built in our noble church of self and throwing a rock right through that stained glass window over and over and over again, continually breaking apart and shattering our beliefs about ourselves so that we can actually continue to have fun moving along this wild and crazy adventure that is continuing to become wilder and crazier. And it can be an adventure. It doesn't have to be stressful like that. I think you're absolutely right. For a certain portion of the populace, 2025 is probably going to be one of the most stressful years
Mhm.
ever. And for those of us who really are willing to recognize that all of that is external and that the internal part of us can move through those circumstances and take them as an adventure, we're going to have more fun than ever. So you can either have more fun than ever, or you can be more stressed out than ever. It's your choice.
So will you come back once as I'm learning what I'm doing here with this this kind of era of the podcast? Will you come back and have some more specific conversations with
Of
us?
course. Of course. This is my favorite thing to do, is have discussions like this.
I appreciate that. Sam, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. I
If
appreciate it.
people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
You can reach me at sam@zenwarriortraining.com.
Beautiful. We'll put all that in the show notes. And to everybody, thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate it. I do this because I want your world and your life to be better. I want you to be free. I want you to be successful. I want you to have fun. I want you to be incredible leaders, because the world could really use that right now. So we're going to be exploring over the next few months, and I'm probably going to be stumbling over my words, but I'm going to have the most incredible people here to talk to make sure that I do this right. I love you a ton. If you have suggestions, if certain pieces of this were really useful and valuable, let me know so we can explore them further. Have a great rest of the day.